The assembly hall floated in the darkness between stars, a massive station that belonged to no single world. Inside its great chamber, representatives from 12 different species gathered around a circular table that glowed with soft blue light. The air smelled strange, filtered and processed to accommodate beings who breathed different atmospheres back on their home planets. Ambassador Jakara stood near the center of the room, her 4 arms folded across her chitinous chest. She was Velkan, an insectoid species known for their patience and careful planning. Her compound eyes scanned the faces around her, reading the anger and fear that rippled through the assembly. Next to her sat High Arbiter Meln, his scaled face set in the expression of cold determination. The Thrasi were reptilian, warriors by nature, and Melon had commanded fleets for longer than some species had traveled the stars. They were all here for one reason: humanity. The matter is clear. Meln's voice hissed through the chamber's translation system. The humans have violated 17 territorial agreements. They have established colonies in protected zones. They have refused to acknowledge our authority. Jakara watched as holographic displays materialized above the table, showing star maps with human settlements marked in angry red. In just 50 years, humanity had spread across nearly 200 systems. The expansion was unprecedented, aggressive, and completely contrary to galactic law. They breed like insects, someone muttered from across the table. Jakara's antennae twitched at the insult, but she said nothing. A mechanical voice cut through the murmurs. Observer Yin recognizes the concern. The machine intelligence's avatar shimmered into view, a collection of geometric shapes that hurt to look at for too long. However, military action should be the final option. Economic sanctions might prove sufficient. We have tried sanctions, Melon snapped. The humans ignore them. They trade among themselves and require nothing from us. Their technology advances at a rate we cannot match through peaceful means alone. This was true, and everyone in the room knew it. Humanity had gone from primitive chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in less than 2 centuries. They had reverse-engineered captured alien technology with disturbing ease. Their weapons, while seemingly crude, were effective and constantly improving. The door at the far end of the chamber slid open. Every head turned as Admiral Chen Wei entered the room. She walked alone, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. She wore a simple dark uniform with minimal decoration, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her face showed no emotion as she approached the table. The seat designated for humanity remained empty. She did not sit. Admiral Chen, Meln began, his tone formal but edged with threat. This council has convened to address humanity's continued violations of galactic law. Your species has been warned repeatedly. Those warnings have been ignored. Chen Wei said nothing. Her dark eyes moved from face to face, measuring, calculating. Jakara felt a chill run down her spine. She had studied humans more than most on the council. There was something about their silence that unnerved her. The way they could stand perfectly still, while their minds worked behind expressions of stone. The council has prepared an ultimatum, Melon continued. He gestured and a new hologram appeared, filled with dense legal text. Humanity will cease all colonial expansion immediately. You will withdraw from the 17 disputed systems. You will submit your military forces to council oversight and regulation, and you will acknowledge the supremacy of galactic law over your own governance. The chamber fell silent. Every species present knew what this meant. Acceptance would reduce humanity to a vassal state, their independence stripped away. Rejection would mean war. You have 30 standard cycles to respond, Melon said. Failure to comply will result in immediate military action against human colonies and shipping. The council's patience has reached its end. Chen Wei stood motionless for a long moment. Then she reached out and tapped a control on her wrist device. The hologram containing the ultimatum copied itself onto her personal system. I will present this to my government, she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. We will consider it carefully. 30 cycles, Admiral, Melon repeated. Not one cycle more. Chen Wei nodded once, turned, and walked back toward the door. She did not hurry. She did not look back. Within moments, she was gone. The chamber erupted in conversation. Species representatives leaned toward each other, discussing what they had just witnessed. Some seemed satisfied. Others looked uncertain. Jakara remained quiet, her mind working through what she had just seen. Something felt wrong. The human admiral had shown no surprise, no anger, no fear. She had simply listened, recorded, and left. A wise decision, Mellon declared, his voice cutting through the chatter. The humans are clever, but they are not fools. They know they cannot stand against the combined might of the Council. They will comply. And if they do not? Asked Ambassador Vrel, a mammalian species known for their cautious nature. Mellon's lips pulled back from his teeth in what might have been a smile. Then we will remind them why the Council has maintained peace for 800 years. Our fleets outnumber theirs 10 to 1. Our weapons have been refined over centuries of warfare. The humans have been in space for barely 200 years. They are children playing at being warriors. Around the table, heads nodded in agreement. The mathematics were simple. The Council controlled thousands of systems. Humanity held barely 200. The Council had tens of thousands of warships. Intelligence reports suggested humanity had perhaps 3,000 vessels of military capability. 30 cycles, Observer Yin's voice chimed. A generous time frame, sufficient for the humans to see reason. The assembly began to disperse. Representatives filed out in small groups, discussing trade implications and military positioning. Some were already planning how to divide human territory once the Council took control. Jakara remained in her seat, staring at the star map still floating above the table. The red markers showing human colonies seemed to pulse like warning lights. She zoomed in on several systems, noting their positions. They were not random. The humans had chosen locations with strategic value, systems that controlled key trade routes and resource-rich regions. You seem troubled, Ambassador, Mellon said, approaching her station. I have been studying human history, Jakara replied quietly. They have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. Another one says, actions speak louder than words. Mellon laughed, a harsh rattling sound. Philosophy will not save them from our fleets. They will respond within 30 cycles and they will bend their knee, or they will be broken. Jakara wanted to share his confidence. The numbers were clear. The strategic advantage obvious. But something gnawed at her mind, a worry she could not quite name. Admiral Chen had not argued. She had not pleaded or threatened. She had simply listened and left. For a species as vocal and passionate as humans were reported to be, that silence felt wrong. Back in her quarters that night, Jakara accessed the Council's historical database. She searched for records of species who had defied the Council before. There were not many. Most had been absorbed peacefully, recognizing the futility of resistance. Those few who had fought were crushed within cycles. The pattern was clear and had held for centuries. The Council was simply too large, too organized, too powerful to resist. So why did Admiral Chen Wei's calm face keep appearing in Jakara's mind? Why did that quiet acceptance feel more like the stillness before a storm than the peace of surrender? She tried to sleep but could not. Somewhere in human space, decisions were being made. The clock was counting down. 30 cycles to respond. Jakara wondered if that would be enough time. She wondered if any amount of time would be enough for what was coming. 10 cycles passed with no word from humanity. Jakara checked the communication channels every morning, searching for any response from Earth or the human colonies. There was nothing. The diplomatic frequencies remained silent. No formal reply. No request for negotiation. No defiant rejection, just silence. She was not alone in her concern. Across Council space, various representatives were beginning to ask questions. Where was humanity's response? Why the delay? Some suggested the humans were simply being difficult, making the Council wait as a show of pride. Others believed they were scrambling to organize their surrender, trying to find terms they could accept. High Arbiter Mellon dismissed all concerns. Let them sweat, he told the Assembly during their regular session. The longer they wait, the more they understand the gravity of their situation. When they finally respond, they will be properly humbled. But Jakara noticed something in the intelligence reports that troubled her. Human ships were moving. Not away from the disputed territories, but toward them. Merchant vessels continued their routes as if nothing had changed. Military patrols maintained their schedules. New construction projects continued on colony worlds. It was as if the ultimatum had never been delivered. On Cycle 15, Jakara received a visitor in her office. Dr. Shireen Ko was one of the few humans who lived and worked in Council space. A xenoanthropologist who studied alien cultures, she was a small woman with dark skin and worried eyes. Ambassador Jakara, she said, bowing slightly in the Velkin manner. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Doctor. Please sit. Shakara gestured to a chair with one of her forearms. I assume you have heard about the ultimatum? Everyone has heard, Ko said quietly. It is all anyone talks about on the stations. They ask me what humanity will do. They assume I know something. And do you? Ko shook her head. I have been away from Earth for 8 years. I chose to live among other species to learn from them. But I know my people. This silence worries me. Why? Shakara leaned forward, her antennae focusing intently on the human woman. Because humans are loud when they are afraid, Ko explained. We argue, we debate. We fill the air with words when we are trying to find a solution. But when we are certain of our course, when we have already made our decision, we become quiet. We stop talking and start doing. The words sent a chill through Shakara's body. You think they have already decided? I think they decided the moment Admiral Chen left that chamber, Ko said. I'm just not sure what they decided. And that terrifies me. After Ko left, Shakara threw herself into research. She accessed every file the Council had on human history, focusing on their military conflicts. What she found did not comfort her. Humans had fought each other for thousands of years before reaching the stars. Their world had seen countless wars, and they had developed strategies and weapons with horrifying efficiency. They had a concept they called mutually assured destruction, where both sides in a conflict would be annihilated if war broke out. They had lived under that threat for generations and somehow survived. More disturbing were the patterns in their warfare. Humans did not always fight head-on. They used deception, misdirection, ambush. They had famous historical quotes about war being based on deception. They celebrated generals who won battles through trickery rather than brute force, and they prepared in silence. On Cycle 20, Captain Reltos of the Thrasi military arrived at the assembly hall. He was there to coordinate the Council's military response once the deadline expired. Shakara attended the briefing, hoping to voice her concerns to someone with authority. The war room was filled with holographic displays showing fleet positions and strategic assets. Reltos stood at the center, his scaled hands gesturing confidently as he outlined the plan. We have assembled a strike force of 800 capital ships, he announced. 12 species have contributed vessels. When the deadline expires with no response, we will jump to the human border world of Threshold 7. We will disable their defenses and occupy the planet. One world will fall and the rest will surrender. What if they fight back? Someone asked. Reltos laughed. With what? Our intelligence shows they have approximately 3,000 military vessels scattered across 200 systems. We outnumber them significantly, and our technology is superior. Any human commander with sense will see the futility of resistance. Shakara raised one of her arms. Captain, I have been reviewing human tactics and history. They are known for unconventional warfare. What if they do not meet us in open battle? Then they will lose their worlds one by one, Reltos said simply. Ambassador, I understand your concern, but this is a military matter. The humans are aggressive and growing, yes, but they are still young. They have not faced a true galactic power in open war. They will learn. On Cycle 25, everything changed. All communication from human space simply stopped. The merchant ships that had been running regular routes suddenly altered course and headed back to human territory. The few human diplomats living on Council worlds received urgent messages and departed on the next available transports. Trade agreements were quietly terminated. Contracts were broken, and then the borders went dark. No ships came out of human space. No messages were transmitted. The normally busy trade lanes that connected human worlds to Council space became empty corridors of silence. Shakara stood in the observation deck of the assembly hall, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, behind that wall of silence, humanity was doing something, preparing something. They are running, Meln said, joining her at the window. Pulling back like animals retreating to their den. They know what is coming. Or they are making ready, Shakara whispered. For what? A siege, we can outlast them. A battle, we outnumber them. An escape, where would they go? Meln shook his head. You worry too much, Ambassador. 5 cycles remain. When the deadline passes, our fleets will move, and this will be over quickly. Shakara wanted to believe him. The numbers supported his confidence. The history of Council military actions showed a pattern of swift victories. No species had successfully defied them in living memory, but the silence from human space was not the silence of fear. It was something else. something that reminded her of the pause before a predator strikes. She returned to her research, diving deeper into human military history. She found accounts of battles where humans had been outnumbered and still won. She read about their tendency to fortify positions and force enemies to come to them. She discovered their love of what they called defensive warfare, turning their territory into traps for invaders. One quote kept appearing in her research, attributed to an ancient human military strategist. "All warfare is based on deception. When able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive." The words echoed in her mind as cycle 29 dawned. One more cycle until the deadline. Jakara barely slept. She monitored the communications channels constantly, hoping for some message from humanity, some indication of their intentions. Nothing came. In the council chambers, Melon gave final orders. "The fleet will assemble at the staging point. When cycle 30 expires, we jump to threshold 7. The operation will be swift and decisive." Around the table, representatives nodded their approval. Some looked eager. Some looked relieved. A few looked uncertain. Jakara said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The course was set. That night she stood again at the observation window watching the stars. Somewhere out there, human worlds spun in the darkness, filled with billions of people who were about to face the full might of the Galactic Council. And somewhere, Admiral Chenwei was watching the same stars, thinking thoughts that Jakara could only guess at. The silence stretched on, deep and profound. 5 cycles ago, Jakara had wondered if 30 cycles would be enough time. Now, as the final hours ticked away, she realized the question was not whether 30 cycles was enough time for humanity. It was whether 30 cycles was enough time for the Council to prepare for what was coming. But the fleets were already moving. The orders already given. Whatever happened next would answer questions that Jakara desperately wished had never been asked. Cycle 30 arrived like any other morning, but the galaxy held its breath. Jakara sat in the council chambers as the final hours counted down. Around her, representatives from 12 species watched holographic displays showing the assembled armada. 843 capital ships floated in formation near the staging point, the largest military fleet assembled in 400 years. "The deadline has passed," High Arbiter Meln announced, his voice carrying satisfaction. "Humanity has chosen silence over compliance. The Council's response will be swift and just." Jakara said nothing. Her compound eyes tracked the fleet movements on the display, watching as the massive formation prepared to jump. She had tried to warn them. She had presented her research, her concerns, her fears. All had been dismissed. Now there was nothing to do but watch. "All ships report ready," Captain Reltos announced from the military command center. His image filled one of the large displays. "We are initiating jump sequence to threshold 7. Estimate arrival in 15 minutes. The chamber fell silent. Everyone watched as the fleet began to shimmer and fade, slipping into faster-than-light travel. 800 ships vanishing in waves of distorted light. They were gone. "Now we wait," Melon said, settling back in his seat. "The humans on threshold 7 will have a choice. Surrender or die. I suspect they will choose wisely." 15 minutes crawled by. Jakara's antennae twitched with nervous energy. She pulled up the data she had gathered on threshold 7. It was a border world recently colonized with a population of about 2 million. Light defenses. A few orbital platforms. Nothing that could stand against the Council Armada. It was meant to be an easy target, a demonstration of power that would bring humanity to the negotiation table. "Fleet has arrived at threshold 7, a technician announced, awaiting initial reports." The displays flickered, showing the feed from the fleet sensors. Jakara leaned forward, her multiple eyes focusing on the images. Threshold 7 hung in space. A blue and green world with 2 small moons. Orbital stations floated in predictable paths. Everything looked normal. No active defense platforms, Reltos reported. Scanning for ship activity. "The system appears empty." "Empty?" Meln frowned. "What do you mean, empty?" "The orbital stations are dark. No power signatures. The cities on the surface show no activity. Thermal scans indicate the entire colony has been evacuated." A murmur ran through the chamber. Jakara felt her chest tighten. The humans had abandoned the world. They had pulled back their people and left nothing but empty buildings. "They ran," someone said with satisfaction. "They knew they could not defend it. But Jakara was not convinced. Why evacuate so completely? Why leave the infrastructure intact? Why not negotiate before losing the world entirely? Captain Reltos, I recommend immediate withdrawal, she said, her voice cutting through the chatter. Withdraw? We just arrived, Meln objected. We will occupy the planet and use it as a staging ground for further operations. Something is wrong, Jakara insisted. Humans do not abandon resources without reason. This could be a trap. Reltos's image showed him considering her words. Sensors are detecting some unusual readings. Multiple objects in the asteroid belt at the system's edge, and the background radiation seems higher than normal. Investigate before committing to occupation, Jakara urged. On the display, the Council fleet began moving closer to the planet, spreading into a standard occupation formation. Ships broke into groups, each with specific targets. Some headed for the orbital stations, others prepared to deploy ground forces. Then the stars moved. That was how Reltos would describe it later, in his report. The stars themselves seemed to shift and flow like water. The objects in the asteroid belt were not asteroids. The unusual radiation was not natural. What the sensors had dismissed as background noise and space debris was actually thousands of ships, running in complete stealth mode, their engines cold, their hulls absorbing sensor sweeps like black holes swallowing light. The Shadow Fleet had been waiting. Contact. Multiple contacts, a voice screamed from the fleet channel. Vessels decloaking on all vectors. We are surrounded. The displays erupted in chaos. Red markers appeared across the tactical map like a disease spreading. Hundreds of ships. Thousands. They had been hiding in the asteroid field, in the debris clouds in the shadow of the planet's moons, in the empty dark between orbits. The Council fleet found itself in a perfect kill box. Jakara watched in horror as human ships opened fire. Their weapons were nothing like what intelligence had reported. These were not crude kinetic projectiles or simple energy beams. These were precision instruments of destruction, tearing through shields like paper, gutting capital ships with single strikes. Evasive action, Reltos shouted. All ships scatter and return fire. But there was nowhere to scatter to. The humans had positioned themselves perfectly. Every direction the Council ships turned, they faced more enemies, and the human vessels moved with a coordination that seemed impossible, flowing around each other like schools of fish, their fire concentrated and devastating. How many are there? Meln demanded, standing from his seat. The intelligence report said 3,000 ships total. At least 4,000 in this system alone, a technician reported, voice shaking. And they are not using technology we have seen before. Their stealth systems are decades beyond our understanding. A Council battleship exploded on the display, its antimatter core detonating like a miniature sun. Then another, and another. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 4 hours. The Council fleet fought with the desperation of beings who realized too late that they had walked into a carefully prepared ambush. They tried to form defensive positions. They tried to jump to faster than light and escape. They tried every tactic in their considerable military experience. Nothing worked. The human ships had jump interdiction fields that prevented escape. They had weapons that could track and destroy smaller vessels with automated precision. They had shields that shrugged off the Council's most powerful guns. And they had numbers. So many numbers. Where did they get all these ships? Someone whispered in the chamber. Jakara knew the answer even before the technician confirmed it. Analysis suggests these vessels were constructed over the past 20 years. Hidden shipyards, secret facilities. They have been building this fleet in the shadows while appearing peaceful. The humans had lied, not with words but with silence. They had let the Council believe they were smaller, weaker, less advanced. They had appeared to struggle with technology while secretly surpassing it. They had seemed scattered and disorganized while actually coordinating a military buildup of staggering scope. All warfare is based on deception. On the display, Reltos fought to save what remained of his fleet. Less than 100 ships still functioned. The humans had destroyed or disabled over 700 capital vessels in 4 hours. We must surrender, Reltos said, his voice broken. Open a channel to the human commander. Request terms. A new image appeared on the display. A human woman in a dark uniform, standing on the bridge of what appeared to be a massive warship. Her face was young, but her eyes were old. This is Captain Sarah Okonkwo of the Terran Defense Force, she said calmly. Your fleet is defeated. We are allowing one ship to retreat, only one. It will carry a message back to your council. Choose quickly." "What message?" Reltos asked. "That we decline your ultimatum," Okonkwo said simply. "You demanded our surrender. You gave us 30 cycles to comply. We used those 30 cycles to prepare, and now you know the cost of threatening humanity." "This is an act of war," Melon said, finding his voice. "The entire council will unite against you." "No," Okonkwo replied. "This is a response to your act of war. You issued an ultimatum. You assembled a fleet. You came to our territory with weapons ready. We simply ensured that your aggression would fail." She gestured off-screen and a data package began transmitting. "We are sending you the locations of every council military installation, fleet position, and defense grid in known space. We have been watching you for years. We know where your forces are. We know how they move. We know your strategies and your weaknesses." The information flooded into the council systems. Shakara felt her blood run cold as she saw it. Detailed intelligence on every military secret the council possessed. The humans had been spying on them with a thoroughness that seemed impossible. "You waited for our reply," Okonkwo said. "Our silence was the reply. We were never going to surrender. We were preparing for this moment. One ship may leave," she continued. "It will be the Velkan cruiser Silverwing. Ambassador Jakara's people have shown more wisdom than the rest of you. Her ship will be spared." Jakara felt every eye in the chamber turn toward her. "Tell them what you saw here," Okonkwo said, looking directly at the camera as if she could see Jakara across the light years. "Tell them that humanity will not be conquered. Tell them that we are done being threatened. And tell them that this fleet you sent was not even half of what we have built." The transmission ended. On the display, the human ships pulled back, creating a corridor. A single Velkan vessel, damaged but functional, limped through the gap and jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying survivors and the weight of humanity's message. The rest of the council fleet burned in the void around Threshold 7. The Silverwing arrived at council space 3 days after the massacre at Threshold 7. Jakara was the first to access the ship's records, downloading the tactical data and survivor reports before anyone else could see them. What she found confirmed her worst fears. The battle had not been a battle at all. It had been an execution, methodical and complete. The emergency council session convened within hours. The chamber that had been so confident 30 cycles ago now reeked of fear. Representatives sat in stunned silence as the recordings played, showing the human fleet emerging from nothing, their weapons cutting through council defenses like they were made of tissue paper. "Impossible," someone whispered. "They could not have built such a fleet in secret." "But they did," Jakara said quietly. "While we watched their colonies and counted their commercial vessels, they were building warships in hidden facilities. While we assumed we knew their capabilities, they were surpassing us in stealth technology, weapons development, and strategic planning." High Arbiter Melon looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. His scales had lost their luster, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who had seen their worldview shatter. "We lost 800 ships," he said, voice barely above a whisper. 800 capital vessels, thousands of crew. "In 4 hours, what do we do?" asked Ambassador Vrel, the mammalian representative who had always counseled caution. "Do we negotiate? Do we surrender?" "We do neither," Melon said, straightening. "We rally our remaining forces. We call upon every species in the council. We build a larger fleet and we crush humanity before they can spread further." Jakara's antennae flattened against her head. "Did you not listen to Captain Okonkwo's message? That fleet at Threshold 7 was not even half of what they possess. If we attack again, the result will be the same." "Then what do you suggest?" Melon demanded. "That we simply accept defeat? That we allow this upstart species to dictate terms to us?" Before Jakara could answer, the chamber's communication system activated. An incoming transmission, broadcasting on all frequencies. Impossible to block or ignore. Admiral Chen Wei's face appeared on the central display. She looked exactly as she had 30 cycles ago, calm and composed. But now there was something else in her eyes, something that had not been there before. Certainty. "People of the Galactic Council," she began, "you issued an ultimatum to humanity. We have issued our response, but that response is not complete. Allow me to clarify our position." A star map materialized behind her, showing council space in blue and human territory in red. As she spoke, New markers appeared, spreading like blood in water. Over the past 72 hours, Terran Defense Force units have conducted precision strikes against Council military installations across 40 systems. We have destroyed your shipyards at Kelvin Prime, disabled the defense platforms around Thrasi, and eliminated the naval base at Koruum Station. Each name she spoke appeared on the map with an X through it. Jakara felt her heart sink as she recognized the locations. These were not minor outposts. These were major strategic assets, the backbone of Council military power. We have not touched civilian populations, Chen continued. No cities have been bombed. No trade routes have been disrupted. Our war is not with the people of the Council. It is with the Council itself, the organization that believed it could threaten us with impunity. Meln stood, his voice shaking with rage. You dare lecture us on morality while you attack our worlds? Chen's expression did not change. We attack your military infrastructure. You attempted to attack our sovereign territory. There is a difference. She gestured, and new data began flooding into Council systems. We are transmitting detailed information about every military asset you possess. Or rather, possessed. You will find that humanity has been observing you for much longer than you realized. Every ship movement, every communication, every strategic decision. We have been watching. The information was staggering. Not just locations, but patrol schedules, communication codes, tactical doctrines, even personal files on military commanders. The humans had infiltrated Council intelligence networks so thoroughly that they knew more about Council military operations than the Council did. How? Vrel asked, more to herself than anyone else. How did they penetrate our security so completely? Jakara thought of Dr. Shireen Ko and the other human researchers scattered across Council space. Scientists and academics welcomed into alien societies, given access to facilities and networks. How many had been gathering intelligence while pretending to study alien cultures? But it went deeper than that. The humans had hacked their communications, infiltrated their systems, built a picture of Council military strength over years of patient observation, all while appearing to be the weaker party. Your fleet at Threshold 7 was meant to be a demonstration of power, Chen said. Instead, it demonstrated weakness. You brought your best ships, your most experienced commanders, your cutting-edge technology, and we destroyed them in hours. What does that tell you about the balance of power? On the display, human ships began appearing throughout Council space, not in massive fleets, but in small, strategic groups. They positioned themselves near major worlds, not to attack, but to be seen. A reminder that humanity could strike anywhere, anytime. We do not want to conquer you, Chen continued. We do not want your territory or your resources. What we want is simple. We want to be left alone. We want to develop our worlds without interference. And we want the Council to understand that threats against humanity will be met with overwhelming force. A new face appeared beside Chen's. Captain Sarah Okonkwo, the woman who had commanded the Shadow Fleet at Threshold 7. She looked young for someone who had just orchestrated the largest military defeat in Council history, the Thrasi shipyards. At Drakenforge are your primary production facility, Okonkwo said, her voice clinical. 23 orbital construction bays capable of building capital ships. You produce approximately 100 vessels per year there. She paused. Correction. You produced 100 vessels per year. As of 4 hours ago, Drakenforge no longer exists. We have eliminated your ability to rebuild your fleet. The display showed footage of the attack. Human ships emerging from stealth, their weapons precise and devastating. The massive shipyard, centuries old and considered impregnable, breaking apart in silence and flame. Meln collapsed back into his seat, the fight draining out of him. Without Drakenforge, the Council could not rebuild. Their military power was crippled, perhaps for generations. Why are you doing this? Shakara asked, speaking directly to the humans on the screen. If you do not want conquest, why attack at all? Why not just refuse the ultimatum? Chen turned her attention to Zakara, and something like respect flickered in her eyes. Because refusal would have meant ongoing conflict. You would have tried again and again, gradually escalating until millions died. This way we end it quickly. We demonstrate that we cannot be conquered, we cannot be threatened, and we cannot be controlled. And we do it with minimal loss of civilian life. You call this minimal? Meln shouted. Thousands of my people are dead. Thousands of soldiers, Chen corrected, who came to our territory with weapons ready. We did not start this war, High Arbiter. You did when you issued that ultimatum. We simply ended it. The transmission shifted, showing scenes from human worlds. Cities full of life, children playing, markets bustling with activity, normal life untouched by war. This is what you threatened, Chen said. Billions of humans living in peace, building their futures. You demanded we surrender our sovereignty, dismantle our defenses, and put ourselves at your mercy. Did you truly believe we would comply? She leaned forward, her voice hardening. Humanity learned long ago what happens to the defenseless. We learned it through centuries of war on our own world. We learned that peace comes not from weakness, but from strength. We learned that the only way to guarantee our safety is to ensure that attacking us is too costly to contemplate. And so you became the very thing you feared, Melon said bitterly. Conquerors. No, Chen replied. We became protectors. Of ourselves, our allies, our future. There is a difference between having the power to conquer and choosing to use it. We have demonstrated our power. Now we choose restraint. A new document appeared in Council systems, terms written in clear language across multiple formats. This is humanity's offer, Chen explained. A peace treaty, not a surrender. We will withdraw from systems with competing claims if you acknowledge our sovereignty in the regions we have settled. We will share defensive technology if you agree to mutual non-aggression. We will trade, cooperate, and coexist if you treat us as equals rather than vassals. And if we refuse? Vrel asked. Then we will not attack your civilian populations, Chen said. But we will eliminate every military asset you possess. Every ship, every base, every weapon. We will leave you defenseless. And we will ensure that you remain defenseless until you are ready to negotiate as equals. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in shocked silence. Chikara looked around at the faces of her fellow representatives. She saw fear, anger, humiliation, and the slow dawning of understanding. They had waited for humanity's reply. The silence had meant humanity was already prepared. 6 months after the Battle of Threshold 7, Chikara stood once again in the assembly hall, but everything had changed. The circular table remained, but the beings seated around it were different now. Some species had sent new representatives, replacing those who had resigned in shame. Others, like Chikara, had remained to help build what came next. High Arbiter Meln was gone, retired to his homeworld in disgrace. The Thrasi had sent a younger representative, one who had not been part of the decision to threaten humanity. Many of the old guard had departed, unable to accept the new reality. The new reality was simple. Humanity had won, not through conquest or occupation, but through a demonstration of power so overwhelming that further resistance seemed pointless. In the months following the battle, human forces had systematically dismantled Council military infrastructure across a dozen systems. They had destroyed shipyards, disabled defense platforms, and eliminated weapon stockpiles. But they had not invaded a single civilian world. Not one city had been bombed. Not one civilian transport had been fired upon. The human war was surgical, precise, and limited exclusively to military targets. It was this restraint, more than the raw power, that had changed minds. Chikara remembered the moment she truly understood what humanity was doing. It was 3 weeks after the battle, when a Velkan colony ship suffered a catastrophic reactor failure in deep space. The ship was crippled, life support failing, over 2,000 Velkan civilians facing certain death. A human vessel had appeared within hours, offering assistance. They had stabilized the reactor, provided supplies, and escorted the colony ship to the nearest safe port. They had asked for nothing in return. When Chikara had questioned the human captain about why they had helped, his answer had been simple. Because they needed help, and we could provide it. That was when she realized humanity's strategy was more sophisticated than she had imagined. They were showing the galaxy what partnership could look like, offering the hand of friendship even as they maintained a grip on weapons powerful enough to destroy worlds. The doors to the assembly hall opened, and Admiral Chen Wei entered. She was no longer alone. Beside her walked representatives from a dozen human colonies, advisors and diplomats who would help negotiate the new order. Behind them came Dr. Shireen Ko, now serving as humanity's chief xenoanthropology consultant. Chen took her seat at the table, in the spot that had been empty 6 months ago. This time she sat. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice carrying the same calm authority it had always held. "I know this has been a difficult transition for many of you. Difficult is an understatement, Ambassador Vrel said, though there was no anger in his voice, only weary acceptance. You destroyed our military capability. You humbled our pride. You remade the political structure of the galaxy in 6 months. We responded to an act of aggression, Chen replied, and we offered terms of peace. The fact that you accepted those terms speaks well of your wisdom. It was true. After weeks of debate and internal struggle, the Council had accepted humanity's treaty. They had no real choice. Without military power, they could not resist. And the terms, while humbling, were not unreasonable. The Council's authority over member species would continue, but it would be advisory rather than absolute. Each species would maintain true sovereignty over their own territory. Disputes would be resolved through negotiation and arbitration, not threats and ultimatums, and humanity would serve as guarantor of the peace, maintaining the largest military force in known space to ensure that no species could threaten another. Some call it an occupation by another name. Vrel continued. Humanity controlling the galaxy through superior firepower. Chen shook her head. Control would mean we dictate your laws, interfere in your governance, extract tribute. We do none of those things. We ask only that you follow the same rules we follow. Respect each other's sovereignty, resolve disputes peacefully, and maintain the common peace. In exchange, we offer protection and partnership. And if we break these rules? Asked the Thrasi representative, a young male named Kren. Then we enforce them, Chen said simply. Not through occupation or conquest, but through the same precision we demonstrated at Threshold 7. We will disable military assets used for aggression. We will protect the victims of aggression, and we will ensure that the cost of breaking the peace is always higher than any possible benefit. Jakara listened to the exchange and marveled at how completely the situation had reversed. 6 months ago, the Council had threatened humanity with military action if they did not comply. Now humanity was explaining how they would maintain peace through the threat of military action. The difference was that humanity had proven they could back up their threats. I have a question, Jakara said, raising one of her 4 arms. Your fleet at Threshold 7, the Shadow Fleet, how long had you been preparing it? Chen smiled slightly. Since we first encountered the Council 30 years ago, we saw how you operated, the way you used military superiority to enforce compliance. We knew that eventually you would try to apply that same pressure to us, so we prepared. For 30 years? Vrel seemed shocked. You planned for this war for 3 decades? We planned for peace, Chen corrected. True peace, based on mutual respect rather than fear of a superior power. But we knew that such peace could only exist if we were strong enough to defend it. So we built strength quietly and carefully while appearing weaker than we were. Dr. Ko spoke up, her voice soft but clear. It is a human saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. We prepared for war so thoroughly that when it came, it ended quickly, with minimal loss of life. The alternative would have been a long, grinding conflict that killed millions. The logic was sound, but it still left a bitter taste. The Council had been deceived, manipulated into underestimating humanity until it was too late to matter. And the spying, Jakara asked. The intelligence gathering? How long were you infiltrating our systems? Also 30 years, Chen admitted. We sent scientists, researchers, cultural observers. Some of them genuinely were there to study your species. Others had secondary objectives. All of them helped us understand you better, identify your weaknesses, and prepare for this moment. She looked around the table. I know this feels like betrayal, but ask yourselves honestly. If you had been in our position, young and vulnerable, facing a coalition of older and more powerful species, would you not have taken every possible precaution? Silence fell over the chamber, because the answer was obvious. Of course they would have. Any rational species would have done exactly what humanity had done. The anger at the assembly hall was not really about the deception. It was about being on the receiving end of it. So what now? Kren asked. Humanity has superior military force. You have shown you will use it. You have established yourself as the dominant power in known space. What are your actual intentions for the future? Chen leaned back in her chair, considering her words carefully. We want what we have always wanted. To develop our worlds in peace. To explore the galaxy. To build relationships with other species based on mutual benefit. We have no interest in empire. We have no desire to rule over you. But you will enforce the rules, Vrel said. Yes, Chen agreed. Because the alternative is chaos. Before the Council, there were constant wars between species. The Council brought peace, but at the cost of freedom. We offer a different balance, freedom with security. Each species governs itself, but none can threaten the others. Peace through superior firepower, Jakara said quietly. Peace through mutual cooperation, backed by the assurance that aggression will fail, Chen replied. It is not perfect, but it is better than the alternatives. Over the following weeks, the details of the new order were worked out. A galactic union would replace the Council, with equal representation for all member species. Disputes would be handled by arbitration courts rather than military threats. Trade would be free and open, with protections for developing species, and humanity would maintain a fleet capable of enforcing the peace, with the understanding that this fleet would never be used for conquest or oppression. Jakara found herself working closely with Dr. Ko to establish cultural exchange programs. If the species of the galaxy were to truly coexist as equals, they needed to understand each other better. No more assuming that others would think or act the same way. No more fatal underestimations. One evening, as they reviewed proposals in Jakara's office, Ko asked a question that had been on Jakara's mind as well. Do you think this will last? This peace we are building? Jakara was quiet for a long moment, her antennae moving in patterns of contemplation. I think it will last as long as humanity remains strong enough to enforce it and wise enough not to abuse that strength. The moment you become what the Council was, everything will collapse. I know, Ko said softly. That is why we're trying so hard to build genuine partnerships. We do not want to rule through fear. We want to lead by example. Then you must never forget what you did at Threshold 7, Jakara said. The speed, the precision, the absolute overwhelming force. That memory is what keeps the peace right now. But it is also what makes everyone afraid of you. Ko nodded. We walk a careful line. Too weak and someone will test us. Too strong and we become oppressors.